Hello, this is Leah Nabi presenting my Filtering the Web Protection, Censorship, or Both poster based off my paper with the same title. This is for LIS 701. So, let's talk about some background filters before we dive into the meat of internet filters and what people's views are. So, the most important thing to note is CIPA. CIPA stands for the Child Internet Protection Act. This was passed in Congress in 2001 to regulate internet content in libraries and schools. There are a couple other bills that they tried to pass before CIPA, but because of government overreach and vague wording, they did not hold up in court or just weren't passed. So, CIPA requires libraries and schools to use internet filters in order to receive E-rate discounts and other federal funds. Not all federal funds, but very specific ones. These filters must block three things: obscene images, child sexual abuse material, and content deemed harmful to minors. Now, I want to talk briefly about what obscene images are. Obscene images are simply a specific category of pornography, and it's determined whether it's obscene through the Miller test, which is a three-pronged test. I won't go through all of it, but the biggest two are that it's obscene as a whole. So something like a romance novel with a small scene about sex, or even a romance novel with a lot of scenes about sex, would not be considered obscene. It might be explicit or considered pornography, but not obscene, because as a whole, it has more than that. The other main part about it is that it has to be obscene, it cannot have any political, scientific, artistic, or social value. Let's get into why people would filter. So the most important thing is to be compliant with CIPA. So that's going to be essentially why a lot of libraries started using federal funds so that they could receive these E-rate discounts. The second is to protect minors from harmful or explicit content. Nobody wants minors to see things that could be harmful to them, and it makes sense to use internet filters as a way to minimize this. Second, it reduces public exposure to pornography. Again, just kind of common sense. Nobody wants to be in public. Most people don't want to go into public and see others watching pornography. This is just kind of a taboo and something that, especially as Americans and really the rest of the world, expect you to do in private. The fourth big reason is going to be that it prevents malware, phishing, and unsafe downloads. An internet filter could prevent these by simply blocking websites that are known for this type of material. And a patron that isn't as technological aware as some of us could easily be scammed from sites like this. And then the third is to protect staff and patrons from harassment. As we know, libraries are open to anyone and everyone, but that means bad actors can come in, and there is the fear that somebody could be watching pornography specifically so that others could catch them. And internet filters could be a way to prevent this. Now, while this is a small subset, it still was mentioned in a couple of the papers that I read. So how do internet filters actually work? There's three main categories of internet filters, and we know essentially the theory behind them, but I'll talk more about what I mean by that. So IP blocking is where an entire website address is blocked. An IP is kind of like a website's home address. For example, I live on Lyndale and Kimball, and I have a number that says where I live. Each website has this number, and I'm not talking about the URL, which would be something like www.youtube.com. I'm talking about the kind of string of numbers separated by two periods. That is the IP address. An IP blocking internet filter would block that entire address. So if Pornhub was blocked, you wouldn't be able to access it. URL filtering blocks specific pages within a site. This is going to be blocking things like where you could go to youtube.com, but you might not be able to go to that sexy ASMR boyfriend channel. That might be blocked. The third one is going to be content filtering. This is kind of the newest one, and this scans for keywords, images, etc. So this might allow you to go to that sexy ASMR boyfriend channel, but it might block certain videos that it deems explicit. Now, internet filters are created by private software companies, meaning they don't tell you how they are created. Otherwise, another company might use the same methodology. We know from computer science knowledge that they obviously use content filtering, URL filtering, and IP blocking all together, but we don't really know how they do it. We just kind of know the theory behind it. And it's important to note this because a lot of people take problem with internet filters because we don't know how they work. So let's get into the ALA's view. The American Library Association is kind of the authority on libraries, and they strongly oppose internet filters. They have a couple reasons why, and I'll go through these. First, they argue that it blocks constitutionally protected content, and they are right by this. Obscene images and child sexual abuse material are not protected under Constitution. However, content harmful to minors is. Things that are harmful to minors could be pages about gambling, how to maximize your wins at a casino, or maybe a page talking about all the drinking games you can play. While these would be harmful to minors, they are also probably harmful to adults, but adults have the right to see that information. They also argue that filters overblock and underblock. And while we don't have a ton of up-to-date research on this, in the past, filters have been known to do this. It creates kind of a false sense of security for people implementing them. And on top of that, it takes away some serious information that people might need. Another reason is they say it invades a user's privacy. If a library uses internet filters, what usually happens, depending on the company they're using the filtering from, is that the software keeps a log of what a user is doing and flags it and sends that to a librarian. That's one of those ways. And that is disclosing what a patron is doing. Again, invading their privacy. The ALA also argues it widens the digital divide. If somebody's only access to the internet is through the library and that library filters, they are not going to have the same access to information that, say, I would as somebody who has non-filtered internet at home. Finally, they say that internet filters reinforce bias and discrimination. An example of this would be a library could decide that they are going to block all pro-LGBTQ content. Now, this most likely won't happen, but just for the sake of example, let's imagine. If a library were to block all the pro-LGBTQ content, then a user would only be able to access the anti-LGBTQ content, and they might gain from that an understanding that there is only bad content out there, making them biased towards LGBTQ people. All very good reasons, but let's look at other people's views. Most librarians are against filtering despite most libraries using this. There's a couple studies that I'm about to reference here, but you can find them all in my references. And this specifically comes from the one where they did research on pornography in libraries. So one of my studies showed that in the past, filters were about 78% effective and have grown to 83% effective. Unfortunately, these studies are kind of old. We don't really have any updated studies on how effective filters are, especially with the explosion of AI. I would assume that they have gotten even more accurate with the explosion of AI and specifically neural networks, which kind of work how a brain works with nodes and these neural connections. Now, one of the studies I read by Hannah Elumd said that there is no strong evidence that filters reduce pornography use in libraries. In fact, they found that as you work in a library, the longer you work, the more likely you are to see somebody watching pornography. And filters, geographic location, none of that had anything to do with the chance that you as a librarian would see pornography at the library. The only thing that changed that statistic was how long somebody had been working there, changing the if you will see pornography at the library to a when you will see pornography. Then, another study I read, which I think is probably the most interesting, is a woman went to 26 libraries in the South. Before she did this, she made a URL list of 100 LGBTQ sites, just the most popular ones, including some anti-LGBTQ sites. She found that in these 26 libraries, 95% of the URL list were available. She specifically targeted libraries that were in counties that voted for Trump in 2016. And I think these numbers are pretty promising. I believe the study was in 2017. So let's get into my views. I do not believe that filters are inherently censorship. I think filters can be used and they can be used well. Libraries do not have every book in existence, but we wouldn't consider that censorship, we just consider it collection development. Filters can reduce harmful exposure, protect against malware, and other unsafe things, while still providing people with information. As the studies above saw, that internet filters did not reduce pornography, but it didn't specifically say whether these were repeat patrons they were seeing. I think it could reduce repeat use of pornography in the library. Additionally, internet filters are getting better and better every day. There are ways to do filtering without over-filtering. I do want to conclude my viewpoint with saying that filters can quickly become censorship if there is no means for adults to opt out of filters and if they're filtering more than what CIPA is requiring them to filter. So on to the future. Most of the existing research on internet filters are outdated. They are before the explosion of AI, before kind of neural networks became very big and common in companies. And I think lots of more research needs to be done. I specifically think studies need to be done on modern AI-based filters. It should be done on accuracy and bias, and we should look at the impact on intellectual freedom. I also think we should try and see how internet filters affect users. I predict that as time goes on, more parents and stakeholders are going to be aware of the dangers of the internet. Right now, we hear a lot about parents taking away screen time because of things they've seen on YouTube Kids or other things. I think as parents get more aware of what is on the internet and what their child can easily access, internet filters will become more common not only in libraries, but in households. So, what do you think? You can find my references here at this URL, at this QR code, but I hope you enjoyed.